Hey there, welcome to lesson 1 in our basic mixing techniques. This is Virgil, and I'm here to kind of show you some workflow ideas for how you might go about mixing a track that has been recorded and it's sent to you, or you've recorded it, and now we're down to the mixing part of the equation. Okay, so this is a track, really super basic. I've already highlighted these guys here. This is a drum set, kick, snare, 3 toms, 2 overheads, and the hi-hat. There's a guitar 1 and a lead, and the bass. Now, before I get too far down the road with this, what I do want to do is tell you this much. I have a specific workflow that I follow. Some of it is Pro Tools centric. But a lot of these concepts can fit the DAW of your choice. So don't feel like that you're going to have to, have some kind of, this is Pro Tools and Pro Tools only. Trust me, this is going to apply to just about every DAW that you're going to find. One thing that I don't like about Pro Tools is when you do create a track, unless you tell it to do this through a template, it never creates a master fader. So the first thing I do before I'm going to start the mix, I'm going to put a master fader in there because that will give me some more processing power on the tail end of the mix. And also lends me the opportunity to do some pre-mastering, making sure that the output is proper, that it's not going out to bus 1 and 2, it's going out to the outputs that will let us hear everything flowing through the master fader, okay? The second thing I'm going to do, and this is kind of, again, this is not something that just Virgil does, but I will say this much. I really am drawn to color coding everything. So, but before I do that, I'm going to also look at how can I expedite this process, okay? So I have drums, okay? I have a lot of drums. I may want to adjust the entire level of the drum set in a mix. I may want to adjust just single instruments, but I want that flexibility. If the drums overall are too loud in the mix, I don't want to go grabbing for every individual fader or have to group them in the Pro Tools way, which is kind of a little unnerving at times. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get this out of the way so you can see this a little bit better. I have selected all the nameplates for the instruments that I want to submix. And submix means basically you're going to take all those instruments and you're going to send them down to one fader so that one fader can control every one of those instruments at the same time, at the same level, okay? So once those are all selected in Pro Tools, you hit Alt-Shift, and then on your output, you select New Track. Now, New Track will come up with this dialog box. So I'm going to use a stereo auxiliary input. I'm going to name it DRM Mix, okay? Just short. Click Create, and then it's going to click Create an aux, and as you can see, all of the drums are now being sent out. Instead of being sent out to the master fader directly, they're being sent to this drum mix bus, okay? So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to do what I do. As I said, I've got a workflow in mind. So this is going to give me all of the drums together. They're red, okay? And I see my little drum mix guy there. I'm going to grab him and drag him down here by the master fader, and I'll explain later why I do that. But it has to do with my workflow, okay? So drums are red. Don't ask me why they're red other than I like to make sure that they're red and I can see them, and drums are hot, right? They're the hottest part of the mix. Well, that's what I say. So I've got 2 guitars, so I'm going to go ahead and group them. So I'm going to shift-click on those nameplates, Alt-Shift, and then click on the output of that. I'm going to create a new track, right? And then I'm going to call this guitar or GTR mix. Create. Okay. So as you can see, they're all going out onto that mix. So, and guitars, I'm going to double click. Oops, hang on a second. Just made a mistake here. So I'm just going to delete that. This is a Pro Tools HD, and what it does is if I double click out in the screen, it'll automatically make a track. So we're not going to deal with it. So I'm going to just hide and make that inactive. So I'm going to double click down here, and guitars are green, right? So that's why I think they should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all my guitars, shift click, double click on that, select the green. It's going to make all my guitars green. Okay, and then I'm going to double click here and make my bass brown because that's what I normally make my bass. So I'm going to grab my guitar mix and drag it down here by my master fader, and my bass I think I'm going to put right next to the drums, and it doesn't have to be that way. And again, these are just workflows, so this is nothing that I need you to really concern yourself about. Another nice thing about Pro Tools is that, and I do want you to concern yourself with this, is that you can color code things and you can make things really visually, discernible, and so you can get the mix done the way you want it and see things. But one of the nice things I like about Pro Tools is the ability to do what's called soft soloing. So I'm going to select my guitar mix right here, and I'm going to command click on the other two guitar tracks on the solo buttons. And what that gives me the ability to do is once I click that, it mutes every single track in the mix except for my guitars. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select my drum mix. Okay, so there's my drum mix. I'm going to command click on all the solo buttons on each one of my drums, all the way up to the hi-hat. And so when I hit solo, what does it do? It muted out the guitars, it muted out the bass, and now it's gonna, the guitars are not coming through, the bass is not coming through, just the drums. Okay, and I don't need to do that to the bass because the bass is by itself, so it has its own solo button, and it's not in a group. Okay, so we're starting with that. So we have now created a master fader. We've color-coded our tracks. We've soft soloed them. And this gets us in a place where we can mix. And I have one last thing to do. When I start mixing, I want to make sure that I'm mixing towards the end of the mix. In other words, I'm mixing with the end of the mix in mind. So what I do as a general way of handling things is I put a dynamics processor on the master fader. Now, there's different people that feel different ways about this, but for me, putting a limiter on the master fader seems to be the most logical thing to do. So I'm going to use the Maxim, which is comes standard with Pro Tools, and I'm going to set it to mix limiter. Okay, again, I'm mixing with the end in mind. I'm mixing with the idea that I'm going to master this track. And trust me, if you start mixing without a limiter on your master fader or without a master fader, when it comes time to master and you throw a compressor on there, it can make your mix just go haywire if you've done processing in other channels and other tracks. And we're going to be doing that with this mix. So like I said, this is just getting your mix set up, okay? I don't know what we're dealing with yet with the mix, but I know this is going to give me a good workflow to start from and a good place to start mixing from, okay? So again, this is the end of lesson 1 in our series on basic mixing techniques, and I'll be seeing you for lesson 2.